Captain Lee Hanna watched the stars through the wide windows of her ship's bridge. The U.S. Vengeance moved slowly through space, patrolling the outer edges of human territory. It was the year 2387, and humans had been traveling between stars for over 300 years. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers. Commander Kim Sora sat at her station, checking reports from other human ships in the area. Lieutenant Park Jinwoo monitored communications from nearby planets. Everything seemed peaceful, but Hannah knew that peace in space could change very quickly. "Captain," Sora said, looking up from her screen, "all patrol routes are clear. No problems reported from any colonies." Hannah nodded but didn't smile. She had been a ship captain for 15 years, long enough to know that quiet times often meant trouble was coming. In space, danger could appear without warning. The human race had learned this lesson the hard way. When they first left Earth and met other alien species, humans had been too trusting. They thought all intelligent life forms would be reasonable and peaceful. They were wrong. Some species saw humans as weak because they tried to talk before fighting. Some aliens thought humans would never fight back. Those aliens learned differently. Now, humanity was part of the Galactic Confederation, a group of 12 major species that controlled most of the known galaxy. Humans had earned their place through careful diplomacy and strategic thinking. But more importantly, they had earned respect through their willingness to fight when necessary. Admiral Park Miho, the head of Human Space Command, had taught every human officer the same lesson. "We don't start wars, but we always finish them." This became known as the Terran Protocol, humanity's promise to respond with overwhelming force to any serious threat. Other species in the galaxy had tested this promise over the years. Each time, they discovered that humans meant what they said. When the Zoraxians attacked human mining colonies, humans destroyed their entire fleet. When the Valkyrie tried to enslave human traders, humans wiped out 3 of their major worlds. Each victory sent a clear message across the galaxy. Humans were not to be underestimated. But that was decades ago. Many younger aliens had never seen humans at war. They only knew humans as traders, diplomats, and scientists. Some were beginning to forget why their elders spoke of humans with such caution. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Lieutenant Park Jinwoo received a transmission from Earth. "Captain, message from Admiral Park. He wants all patrol captains to increase surveillance in Sector 7. "Why Sector 7? Hannah asked, moving to look at the star chart displayed on the main screen. He didn't say, "Ma'am," but there have been strange reports from some of the colony worlds in that area. Hannah studied the map. Sector 7 bordered territory controlled by the Kethvar Empire, one of the oldest and most arrogant species in the galaxy. The Kethvar had existed for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. They considered themselves superior to all other life forms, especially younger species like humans. "What kind of reports?" Hannah asked. Jinwoo checked the screen. "Missing livestock on farming worlds. Damaged crops. Some colonists report seeing strange lights in the sky at night." Commander Sora looked concerned. "Could be raiders, Captain. Pirates sometimes hit remote colonies." Hannah shook her head. "Pirates steal things they can sell. They don't kill farm animals and destroy crops for no reason." She paused, thinking, this sounds like someone conducting experiments. The 3 officers stood in silence for a moment, understanding the implications. If someone was experimenting on human colonies, it meant they didn't respect human territorial rights. It meant they saw humans as subjects for study rather than equals. "Set course for Sector 7. Hannah ordered and sent a message to Admiral Park. "Tell him we're investigating personally." As the Vengeance changed direction and accelerated toward the troubled region, Hannah felt the familiar tension that came before conflict. Her crew was well-trained and experienced. Her ship was equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity could build, but she hoped they wouldn't need to use them. Meanwhile, in the capital city on Earth, Ambassador Choi Juno was preparing for another monthly meeting with the Galactic Confederation Council. These meetings were usually boring affairs where representatives from different species discussed trade agreements and territorial disputes. But lately, Juno had noticed something troubling. The Kethvar delegates had become more dismissive toward humans. They no longer pretended to listen respectfully when Juno spoke. They whispered among themselves and sometimes laughed openly at human proposals. Their attitude suggested they no longer feared human retaliation. This was dangerous. In galactic politics, respect was everything. If one species believed another was weak, conflicts would inevitably follow. The HFY seemed to think that decades of peace had made humans soft. Juno knew they were wrong, but he also knew that words alone wouldn't convince them. The HFY would only understand strength, and if they continued their current path, they would force humanity to demonstrate that strength. As Captain Hannah's ship approached Sector 7, she could see the lights of human colonies on several planets below. These were peaceful farming worlds where families had lived for generations. The people there had never known war. They trusted that human military forces would protect them from any threat. Hannah intended to keep that trust, no matter what the cost. She didn't know it yet, but events were already in motion that would test humanity's resolve in ways that hadn't been tested for decades. The HFY had made a decision that would change everything. The age of peace was about to end. The first call came from New Busan, a quiet farming world on the edge of human space. Yang Daeho had been raising cattle on his family ranch for 20 years. He knew his animals better than most people knew their neighbors. Captain Lee, his voice crackled through the communication system of the Vengeance. Something killed 30 of my cattle last night, but they didn't eat them. They just cut them up like they were studying them. Hannah listened to farmers report with growing concern. Did you see who did this? No, ma'am, but there were strange marks on the ground. Perfect circles burned into the dirt, and some kind of green liquid left behind. Lieutenant Park Jinwoo ran the details through the ship's database. Captain, that green substance matches HFY bioanalysis fluid. They use it to preserve tissue samples. Commander Kim Sora looked up from her station. Why would the HFY be taking samples from human livestock? Hannah didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about the implications. The HFY were known for their scientific research, but they had treaties with humanity. Those treaties clearly stated that no experiments could be conducted on human worlds without permission. Over the next week, more reports came in. Farmer Lee Minji on New Seoul reported destroyed crops arranged in strange patterns. The plants hadn't been eaten or harvested. They had been carefully dissected and left to rot. Colony Administrator Na Yerin from New Incheon reported that several families had found their pets missing, with only trace amounts of the same green fluid left behind. They're testing us, Hannah said to her senior officers during their daily briefing. The HFY are seeing how far they can push before we respond. Should we report this to Admiral Park? Commander Sora asked. Not yet. We need more evidence, and I want to see how far they're willing to go. Hannah didn't have to wait long for her answer. The emergency signal came from New Montana, a colony world with over 50,000 human settlers. Lieutenant Commander Na Yerin's voice was filled with panic as she contacted the Vengeance. Captain Lee, we have a major situation. 3,000 colonists have disappeared overnight. Men, women, and children. Entire families are just gone. Hannah felt her blood turn cold. Gone? What do you mean gone? Their homes are empty, but there are no signs of struggle. No bodies, no blood. Just those same green stains and burn circles in the ground. And, Captain, some of the missing are children. Babies. The bridge of the Vengeance fell silent. Every crew member understood what this meant. Someone had just committed an act of war against humanity. Within hours, long-range sensors detected massive HFY research vessels leaving the New Montana system. They weren't even trying to hide what they had done. Then came the transmission that changed everything. Supreme Hierarch Velthak of the HFY Empire appeared on the main screen of the Vengeance. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. His voice was cold and clinical when he spoke. Human vessels in this sector, we acknowledge your concern about our research activities. The specimens we have collected will provide valuable scientific data about your species' biological responses to various stimuli. Specimens. Commander Sora whispered in horror. Velthak continued. Your species has always fascinated our researchers. Your emotional responses are particularly interesting. We have discovered that human pain tolerance varies significantly based on age and family relationships. The transmission included audio recordings. The sounds that came through the speakers made several crew members leave the bridge. They were the screams of human beings in agony. Among them, clearly audible, were the cries of children. Captain Hannah's hand shook as she reached for the communication controls. "This is Captain Lee Hannah of the United Earthship Vengeance. You will return our people immediately." Velfac's image showed what might have been amusement. "Your people are contributing to the advancement of galactic science. Their sacrifice will benefit all species. They didn't volunteer for your experiments," Hannah said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Consent is not required from test subjects," the HFY leader replied. "Your species has grown soft during this period of peace. You have forgotten your place in the natural order. We are simply reminding you." The transmission ended. Captain Hannah stood motionless for several minutes, staring at the empty screen. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but filled with deadly intent. "Lieutenant Park, send an immediate message to Admiral Park Miho. Tell him the HFY have committed acts of war against human colonies. They have taken 3,000 of our people, including children, for biological experiments." "Yes, ma'am." "Commander Sora, prepare all weapon systems and place the ship on high alert." "Right away, Captain." Hannah walked to the large window that looked out into space. Somewhere out there, human children were being tortured by alien scientists who saw them as nothing more than laboratory animals. "Lieutenant Park, add this to the message for Admiral Park. Request immediate activation of the Terran Protocol. The HFY have crossed the line." The Terran Protocol had not been used in over a century. It was humanity's ultimate response to existential threats. Once activated, it meant total war with no possibility of surrender or negotiation. As the message was sent toward Earth, Captain Hannah continued to stare into space. She thought about the 3,000 colonists now suffering in HFY laboratories. She thought about the children who would never see their families again. The HFY had made a terrible mistake. They thought decades of peace had made humans weak. They were about to learn the difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight. The age of human mercy was over. Admiral Park Miho stood in the Emergency Command Center deep beneath Earth's surface. The room was filled with the highest-ranking military officers in human space. For the first time in over a century, they were preparing for total war. The large screen at the front of the room showed detailed reports from Captain Lee Hannah and other patrol ships. Each report was worse than the last. The HFY had not only taken 3,000 human colonists, but were broadcasting their torture sessions across the galaxy as a form of scientific demonstration. Commander on Jahun, head of military intelligence, read the latest intercepted transmission. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "The HFY are calling it Project Human Study. They claim our people provide excellent data about pain response and emotional breakdown patterns." General Song Myaun, the youngest person ever appointed to the military council, slammed her fist on the table. "They're torturing our children and calling it science." "They're doing more than that," Admiral Park said quietly. "They're testing us. They want to see if we become too soft to respond." The room fell silent as everyone understood the implications. The HFY had studied human history. They knew about humanity's reputation for devastating retaliation. They were deliberately provoking humans to see if that reputation was still deserved. Dr. Lim Chai-won, head of xenobiology research, presented her analysis. "The HFY leadership believes they understand human psychology. They think we will negotiate, compromise, and eventually accept our actions if they make them seem scientific rather than hostile." "What do you think, Doctor?" Admiral Park asked. "I think they've made the worst miscalculation in galactic history," she replied. The vote was simple and unanimous. Every officer in the room agreed. The Terran Protocol would be activated for the first time since the Valkyrie War 93 years ago. Within hours, secret messages went out to every human ship, base, and colony in the galaxy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Captain Bei Taehyun was commanding a deep space mining operation near the Galactic Rim when he received the activation order. Without hesitation, he ordered his entire fleet of industrial ships to convert to military configuration. Mining lasers became weapons. Cargo holds were cleared to make room for troops and supplies. Similar scenes played out across human space. Explorer ships emerged from distant star systems. Research vessels abandoned their scientific missions. Even civilian cargo haulers began installing weapons and joining the growing armada. But the most shocking response came from ships that other species had never known existed. From hidden bases throughout human territory, massive military vessels began appearing. These were not the patrol ships and escorts that other aliens were familiar with. These were true warships, designed for one purpose: the complete destruction of enemy civilizations. The Galactic Confederation Council met in emergency session as reports reached them about the massive human fleet buildup. Ambassador Choi Juno sat calmly at the human delegation table, while alien representatives whispered anxiously among themselves. The Altarian delegate spoke first. "Ambassador Choi, surely humanity can resolve this dispute through peaceful negotiation?" Juno's response was broadcast live across the galaxy. "The Kethvar have taken 3,000 of our people, including children, and are torturing them for scientific research. There will be no negotiation." The Centaurian representative tried a different approach. "But war will benefit no one. Perhaps the Kethvar can be convinced to return your people and pay compensation." "The Kethvar chose to cross the one line we drew in the stars," Juno replied. "They chose to torture our children. There will be no mercy, no surrender terms, no compromise of any kind." The vegan ambassador, an old and respected figure in galactic politics, leaned forward. "Ambassador, surely you remember the devastation that followed the last activation of your Terran protocol. Entire worlds were left uninhabitable." Juno nodded. "We remember. We also remember why it was necessary. The Kethvar wanted to study human pain. Now, they will learn about human rage." Meanwhile, Captain O'Summon received orders to return his patrol fleet to Sol System immediately. As his ships approached Earth, he was amazed by what he saw. Hundreds of human vessels filled the space around humanity's homeworld. Some were familiar designs, but others looked like nothing he had ever seen before. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "I'm detecting at least 200 ships in this system alone, and long-range sensors show similar buildups at every major human world." On Earth, Admiral Park Miho addresses fleet commanders via secure transmission. "The Kethvar believe they understand us because they have studied our history. They see our preference for diplomacy as weakness. They mistake our restraint for inability." The transmission reached every human ship in the galaxy. Captains, admirals, and even civilian volunteers listened as their supreme commander continued. "They have studied our past wars and believe they can predict our response. They are wrong. Every previous conflict was limited by our desire to preserve galactic stability. This time, they have attacked our children. There will be no limitations." Dr. Lim Chai-won provided the fleet with complete intelligence about Kethvar technology, biology, and military capabilities. "They have advanced defenses and powerful weapons," she explained to the assembled officers. "But they have one fatal weakness: arrogance. They cannot imagine that any younger species could truly threaten them." As the largest military force in human history prepared for war, a final transmission was sent to the Kethvar Empire. It was simple and direct: return our people immediately or face the consequences. The Kethvar response came within hours. Supreme Hierarch Velthak appeared on screens across human space, flanked by images of human prisoners in laboratory cages. "Your threats are meaningless," he said. "These specimens will continue to serve the cause of science. Your species will learn to accept its proper role in the galactic hierarchy." Admiral Park Mio watched the transmission with cold fury. When it ended, he gave the order that would reshape the galaxy. "All fleets, begin Operation Cleansing. The Kethvar Empire is to be completely eliminated." The war had begun. Captain Kong Minsik stared at the massive Kethvar homeworld through the bridge windows of the flagship. The planet was protected by energy shields that had defended it for thousands of years. Ancient orbital stations bristled with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The Kethvar believed their homeworld was impossible to attack. They were wrong. All ships, begin the assault, Mensik ordered. What happened next shocked even the human crews. The Kethvar defenses, advanced beyond most species' understanding, began failing within minutes. Human ships adapted to their shield frequencies in real time. When the Kethvar switched to different weapons, human vessels immediately developed countermeasures. "How are we doing this?" asked Lieutenant Shin Yunha from her position at the tactical station. "We've been preparing for this war for decades," Captain Mensik replied. "While other species thought we were just peaceful traders, our scientists were studying every possible enemy. We know their technology better than they do." The orbital stations fell one by one. The planetary shields collapsed. Within 6 hours, the homeworld of the Kethvar Empire was defenseless. But the human fleet didn't just attack military targets. They systematically destroyed everything that made Kethvar civilization possible. Power plants were reduced to rubble. Cities were burned from orbit. Transportation networks were completely eliminated. On the planet's surface, Kethvar civilians ran in panic through streets filled with fire and smoke. They had never experienced war on their own world. For 10,000 years, they had been the ones who attacked others. Commander Park Ji-hun led ground forces into the capital city. His mission was not to capture territory or take prisoners. His orders were simple: complete elimination of all Kethvar research facilities and anyone involved in the torture of human captives. "Sir," reported Sergeant Moon Jisoo, "we found the main laboratory. There are human prisoners still alive." Ji-hun rushed to the facility. What he saw there made him understand why Admiral Park had ordered total extermination. The Kethvar hadn't just been studying humans. They had been breaking them apart piece by piece, keeping them alive as long as possible to study their pain responses. Among the survivors was a small girl named Han Yuna. She was only 6 years old and had been taken from New Montana 3 weeks ago. When she saw the human soldiers, she cried with relief. "Are you here to take me home?" she asked. Ji-hun knelt beside her. "Yes, little one, we're here to take you home." But there weren't many survivors to rescue. The Kethvar had been thorough in their experiments. Of the 3,000 humans taken, fewer than 200 were still alive. As the rescue operations continued, other human fleets were hunting down Kethvar forces throughout the galaxy. Commander Shin Yunha commanded a fast pursuit group that tracked fleeing enemy ships across multiple star systems. "Captain," her navigation officer reported, "the Kethvar fleet is trying to escape into the Vortex Nebula." "Follow them," Yunha ordered. No Kethvar ship leave the sector. The chase lasted for days. Every time the Kethvar thought they had escaped, human ships appeared to continue the hunt. The aliens had superior speed, but humans had superior determination. When the last Kethvar warship was destroyed, Yuna's fleet began searching for colonies and outposts. Any world that had supported the torture of human prisoners was marked for destruction. Meanwhile, other Kethvar groups tried more desperate escape methods. Some attempted to hide in pocket dimensions that existed between normal space and hyperspace. These were secret locations that most species didn't even know existed. Colonel John Woojin's engineering corps had been prepared for this possibility. "Deploy the dimensional collapse devices," he ordered. The devices were human technology that the Kethvar had never seen before. They tore apart the barriers between dimensions, making it impossible for anyone to hide in pocket space. Kethvar survivors trapped in collapsing dimensions sent desperate messages begging for mercy. The human response was always the same: "You showed no mercy to our children." Some Kethvar tried to retreat to their oldest colonies, cities built deep underground on heavily fortified worlds. They believed the humans would never be willing to destroy entire planets just to reach them. Lieutenant Colonel Han Soo-young proved them wrong. Her bombardment teams used weapons that could crack a planet's crust like an eggshell. When the underground cities were exposed, they were eliminated completely. "This is insane," one of her junior officers said as they watched an entire world break apart. "We're destroying civilizations that took thousands of years to build." They destroyed children who had barely begun to live, Su-young replied coldly. The systematic elimination continued for months. Major Lee Dong-woo led special operations teams that tracked down individual HFY refugees throughout the galaxy. No hiding place was safe. No plea for mercy was accepted. On the remote world of Kepler, 442b, a small group of HFY scientists who had not participated in the human experiments tried to surrender. They offered to share all their technology in exchange for their lives. Major Lee's response was broadcast across the galaxy. Your species chose genocide when you tortured our children. You will receive genocide in return. The message was clear to every species in the Galactic Confederation. This was not a war with limited goals. This was complete extermination. Captain Moon, Jisu reported each successful elimination to Fleet Command. HFY colony on Zirian Prime eliminated. No survivors. HFY research station in the Vega system destroyed. Final HFY refuge in the Andromeda sector has been cleansed. Within 6 months, a civilization that had existed for over 10,000 years was reduced to scattered groups of refugees. But even the refugees were being hunted down systematically. The HFY Empire was dying, and humanity was making sure it died completely. Captain Lee Hanna stood on the observation deck of the U.S. Vengeance, looking out at the empty space where the HFY homeworld once existed. The planet was gone completely. In its place was only dust and debris slowly spreading into the void. 1 year had passed since the beginning of Operation Cleansing. The war that wasn't really a war was finally over. Lieutenant Park Jinwoo approached with a data pad in his hands. His face was serious, but showed a hint of satisfaction. Captain, Admiral Park has confirmed it. The last HFY research facility has been eliminated. Intelligence reports no remaining survivors anywhere in the galaxy. Hannah nodded slowly. She felt no joy in the victory, only a deep sense that justice had been served. How many did we find in the end? 412 human survivors total. Jinwoo replied quietly. Most were children. The medical teams say they will need years of treatment, but they will recover. Among those survivors was little Han Yuna, the 6-year-old girl who had asked if the soldiers were there to take her home. She was now safe with her aunt on New Seoul, slowly learning to trust adults again. Her parents hadn't survived the HFY experiments, but she would live to have a future. Commander Kim Sora entered the observation deck, carrying the final battle reports. Captain, all human fleets are reporting mission complete. The HFY species has been declared extinct. The word felt strange to say aloud. Extinct. An entire intelligent species had been removed from existence. It was something that had never happened in galactic history, at least not by deliberate action. Any regrets, Commander? Hannah asked. Sora thought for a moment before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they chose to torture children. But I don't regret protecting our people. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Choi Juno was preparing for his first meeting with the Galactic Confederation Council. Since the war ended, the council chamber would be different now. There would be no HFY delegates, no ancient voices claiming superiority over younger species. The other alien representatives were already seated when Juno entered. The room was unusually quiet. No one seemed willing to make eye contact with the human ambassador. The Altarian delegate, who had once urged peaceful negotiation, spoke first. His voice was carefully respectful. Ambassador Choi, the Confederation wants to formally acknowledge that the HFY committed acts of war against humanity. Their actions were inexcusable. Juno sat down calmly. Thank you for that acknowledgement. However, the Centaurian representative added hesitantly, some member species are concerned about the completeness of humanity's response. An entire species has been eliminated. The human ambassador's reply was measured but firm. The species known as HFY violated the most fundamental law of civilization. They chose to torture children. They have been removed. The vegan ambassador, whose people were known for their wisdom and long perspective, asked the question everyone was thinking. Ambassador, does humanity have any regrets about this action? Juno's answer became the new reality of galactic politics. We regret that it was necessary. We regret that they chose this path. But we do not regret protecting our children. And we want every species in this galaxy to understand clearly. We will do it again if forced to. The silence that followed was profound. Every delegate understood that the balance of power in the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Humanity had demonstrated that they possessed both the capability and the will to completely destroy any species that threatened them. In the months that followed, remarkable changes occurred throughout known space. Species that had been testing human boundaries quietly withdrew their provocations. Trade routes that had been sources of constant disputes were suddenly resolved in humanity's favor. Territorial claims that had been contested for decades were abandoned. Captain Bei Taehyun, now commanding the patrol fleet in former Kefar space, filed regular reports about these changes. All sectors remained quiet, he reported to Fleet Command. No territorial violations, no hostile actions, no requests for negotiations that might disadvantage humanity. The empty Kefvar systems were officially designated as Terra Memorial Zones. No other species was permitted to colonize these worlds or harvest their resources. They would remain empty as monuments to the consequences of crossing humanity's moral boundaries. Dr. Lim Chai-won established research stations in some of these systems to study the aftermath of complete planetary destruction. Her work was purely scientific, but the message was clear. Humans were learning from this war to become even more effective in future conflicts. Young aliens throughout the galaxy grew up hearing stories about the Kefvar extinction. Their elders made sure they understood the lesson. Humans appeared peaceful and reasonable most of the time, but they would go to any length to protect their children. Captain Oh Sungmin, now an admiral commanding the Outer Rim fleets, noted this change in his reports. Piracy has decreased by 90% in human territory, he wrote. Criminal organizations are avoiding any actions that might harm human civilians, especially families with children. The galaxy had become more peaceful, but it was a peace built on clear understanding rather than mutual trust. Everyone knew that humanity remained exactly what they had always been, a species capable of incredible kindness and devastating violence, depending on how they were treated. Captain Lee Hanna returned to her regular patrol duties, but now her ship traveled through space that was completely secure. Other species moved aside when human vessels approached. Communications were always respectful. Requests for assistance were granted immediately. Standing on her bridge, looking out at stars that now seemed much more peaceful, Hannah understood that the war had changed everything. The Kefvar had wanted to study human nature. In the end, they had taught the entire galaxy exactly what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The lesson would not be forgotten.